And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for tuning in. As promised, today we are here with the wonderful and world-renowned Dr. Bill Anton of CEO Effectiveness, and going to dive into another relevant topic this morning, having to do with reaching peak performance. And I know for so many of us in the business world and the entrepreneur world, being able to push ourselves to that next level, being able to attain goals that we thought we never could attain, really is something that we always strive to do, right? But there are certain factors and certain keys that the expert himself is going to dive into this morning. So Dr. Bill Anton, good morning, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. So Dr. Anton, so let's kind of dive in. I know there's three key elements that you're going to touch on today. But when we think about performance, right? How do you define performance when it comes to human psychology, human behavior? What is performance?
Well, I think that performance is the final common pathway of your intentions as applied to the world of work or some task or something you're trying to achieve. I think the mistake that a lot of people make is to define their capability as their functional ability. That is, they use their performance as indicating the limits of what they can do and not realizing the many factors that contribute to performance.
So something as simple as saying, I'm going to go and do X, Y, or Z task, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. Is it that simple?
Well, it's the best of your ability at the time. The big mistake is assuming that the best of your ability is a permanent condition, because the best of your ability is what the circuitry of your brain allows at that moment in time and how that interacts with other variables that make up your ability to produce or achieve what you want.
So there's a bit of fluctuation, kind of just depending on the day, depending on the factors and what's going on in our lives.
Yeah, but even more important than the day-to-day fluctuation is the governor over your capability. As I've said before, the mistake is to confuse functional ability, that is what you're actually able to do, with capability, which is what the organism or you at your best are capable of. And it's the disparity between those two that is what makes CEOE different from any other kind of executive coaching available.
Outstanding. So there's this concept of motivation, right? Drive, right? What's that driving force, right? And so, I would think that the more drive that I have, if I'm really pedal to the metal and I'm super motivated, that I'm going to perform very well. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
No, it isn't. Because there's a principle in psychology. It's actually one of the only things referred to as a law in psychology, because basically psychology is an empirical science, and you never talk about laws and you never talk about proof. You talk about evidence and lending support and stuff like that. But the Yogis Dotson Law is phenomenal. It's a bell-shaped curve, which is basically the middle of the curve is the highest point, and then it tapers off on both sides of the curve. And on one side of the curve, you have performance. And on the other side of the curve, the base of the curve, you have drive or arousal or motivation. You can call it whatever you want, but it's access to whatever energy you have available to engage in some kind of performance. Now, the big, interesting breakthrough of the Yogis Dotson Law, and this has been replicated in maybe 5,000-6,000 studies, is that optimal levels of performance are achieved at intermediate levels of drive. So if you're a person that is kind of like laid back, unmotivated, if your circuitry only allows you a minimal amount of energy, then increasing your drive would increase your performance. But again, if you're on the right side of the Yogis Dotson curve, if you're somebody that's always pushing yourself, stressing, trying to do more, faster, harder, more effectively, and you're already past optimal levels of performance, then your actual performance is going to decline. And things like flow, adaptability, optimal health, optimal performance are all at the top of the curve, and the top of the curve is linked to intermediate levels of drive.
So it sounds like balance, right? Having balance in our lives, right? So be able to kind of have a pecking order, an order of magnitude of certain things that we want to accomplish, but being able to understand that it's not pedal to the metal 24/7, right? There is a time to kind of let up off the gas a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, like there are periods of time when you give it all you got to achieve some tactical end in pursuing your strategic purpose. But those should be rare events. And you're correct. The word balance is really interesting because people think of balance as, well, I'm just spreading myself too thin. I'm not giving it my all.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just the opposite. Again, we have thousands of studies demonstrating that optimal performance, that is the best performance that you're capable of, is achieved at intermediate levels of arousal or drive.
Gotcha. So right, that intermediate area, that's where we want to live, right? To really push ourselves to the next level.
Right. In fact, in Business Success Through Self-Knowledge, there's actually a depiction of the Yerkes Dotson Law.
And that's your book, correct?
It's the first book.
First book, okay.
We wrote,
Wonderful.
the first popular book, yeah.
Outstanding. Very good. Now, so there's this second concept, right? So there's intermediate levels of drive, right? Has a lot to do with balance, okay? Now, you also mentioned something that's very interesting to me, adaptability, right? So when we think about adaptability, what is it we should kind of have in mind? What should we would be looking at to adapt to?
Well, adaptability means that you're able to be in any situation and access all of the parts of your brain that are necessary in order to respond optimally to that situation. Now, what happens is that many of us, as a result of our histories, we have mental models that really convey to us false information about what we're capable of achieving. And that false information is mostly on the negative side. So we tend to, almost everyone, particularly anyone on either end of the Yerkes Dotson curve, is going to be underestimating what they're capable of because they don't have access to the most important part of their brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. In many ways, the prefrontal cortex is the executive center of the brain. And all of us are sort of on a continuum that limits the impulses that get there. If we could have 100% access to the prefrontal cortex in our decisions, particularly our business decisions, then we would make very good decisions. We would make them easily because we don't have to sort of like be fighting our own tendencies that limit our self-appraisal, that make us have an unrealistic view of ourselves. And so we're going to have all of our equipment working seamlessly to achieve whatever it is we need. That's adaptability. And adaptability is the final common pathway of having optimal access to everything that you possess as an organism. And no one ever gets there 100%, but most of us, truly, even very successful people, are operating on only a fraction of what they're capable of.
So, Dr. Anton, let me ask you, is there a connection between being adaptable and being objective?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Personal mastery is really the process of objectifying your view of yourself. Now, all of us fear that if we did that, it would be a step down, but it's just the opposite. You have to go through sort of like the dark night of the soul a little bit in order to face yourself honestly. But those that do experience not only a relief, but experience a level of energy, a reduction of anxiety, a level of performance and excitement about work and their contributions that they could only have dreamed of in their old state.
So it's really, and so what I'm hearing, and golly, that when the more you say this, it resonates with me on many different levels, but knowing myself, right, as a leader, as a business owner, being able to be adaptable, whatever circumstances come my way or my company's way, and then being able to maintain a balance and managing all those different factors and those variables, which has a lot to do with how well I understand at a deeper level what it all means to me.
Right. Understand who you truly are, not who you think you are. And that distinction is something that many organizations ignore, because what they do is they take a naive view of performance, that if you can create structure, if you can create rules, if you can get everyone to follow the rules, then your company is going to improve their performance. And that is true, but that's far away from optimal performance. Right. Because to achieve optimal performance, you don't need to take everyone as they see themselves, which is often a false view, and get them to all row in the same direction, you need to have everyone in your team engage in personal mastery. That is, to understand the ways in which their mental models limit them, to be dedicated to reality at all costs, to engage with each other in a way that is unencumbered by previous conceptions of themselves, and to understand that when you operate at that level as a team, that something emerges that is greater than the sum total of the capabilities of the team, and it feeds itself back and forth, that every time the team's performance improves, each individual on the team gets excited about stretching themselves a little more, and then eventually you have a team where every member is engaged at optimal levels of performance and adaptability, and the team as an entity itself is also engaging at that level.
So you just said something that really it resonated with me as well. So getting excited, right? Which means so emotions, right? And so what role, I mean, because Kyle, you know, you think about the trials and tribulations, the ups, the downs, the wins, the losses. There's a lot of emotional variability there, right? When we're talking about being in business, attaining certain goals, not reaching certain goals. So what role do emotions play?
Yeah, well, emotions play a vital role. I see emotions in a couple of different ways. One, there are the negative emotions, which are linked to the amygdala, so that, you know, as I've said in one of our previous conversations, that the brain, the function of the brain is to keep us physically alive.
Right.
And that the brain is like much more likely to focus on the negative. It even screens for negative information. So that kind of emotions often interferes with what we're doing. But there's another avenue of emotion that's really helpful. And if you'll recall, since the brain gives priority to danger, and since the brain interprets ambiguity as danger, if we learn to trust our gut as much as our head, because our head is going to keep us safe, but our gut is going to give us different information than our head is going to give us. But you can only trust your gut if through personal mastery, you have objectified your relationship with yourself and the world. And so you have to work on yourself, on developing yourself, on making yourself as fine an instrument as you're capable of being, to be able to have your emotions work on your behalf.
So if there was one thing that everyone who is watching, if there's one thing that they could do, right, to begin the process of self-mastery, right, what would that one thing they could put into practice today? What would it be?
Well, I would say doing the harder thing is a good rule to follow. But I think the hardest thing is to take the things that you're most certain of, like, I know I'm not good at math. I know that I procrastinate. I know that I drink too much. All the things that you just take as givens and begin to doubt them. In other words, to develop some serious doubts about the things that you're most certain of in yourself. And as a consequence of those, to take baby steps in doing the harder thing on a daily basis, and you'll crack some of the ice that's keeping you limited. And that's probably what I would say you should do on your own if there was only one thing you could do.
So start by doing the harder thing and baby steps moving forward.
Right. And every single decision, don't always take the default, which is sort of like myelinating all the existing circuits in your brain.
Of course.
But create some new cell associations in your brain, which is the beginning of changing the old patterns of thinking and self-limiting behaviors, and really unleashing a lot of creative energy, joy, and really optimal performance.
Outstanding. So, all right, so to kind of bring it full circle. So when we're talking about performance, right, that there's three things that we want to consider, right? So first and foremost, it was the Yogis Dotson Law. Is that correct?
Yeah, which basically is that optimal levels of performance are achieved at intermediate levels of drive.
So intermediate levels of drive, right? So essentially meaning that you don't want to be in a position where you're pushing, right, the pedal to the metal, right, all the way, but you don't want to have no motivation or drive either. Yeah. You want to be in that sweet spot right in the middle.
Yeah, that's going to be your ongoing base level of functioning, is to be in the middle of the Yerkes Dotson Law. There are tactical situations where you stay up all night and you push the pedal to the metal. But if you do that as a habit, then you're actually limiting your access to your greatest potential.
So this idea of go, 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 got to do more,
Yeah.
more, squeeze more hours in the day, 20-hour workday, not necessarily the best path to take.
No, and at extreme levels, it leads to illness.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good. And so number two, we mentioned was a function of adaptability, right? So adaptability meaning
Adaptability means that you can continually evolve your capacity to create your own future. It means that you can face a new situation and have access to all parts of your brain and all parts of your experience and have it present a pathway almost instantly that gives you, that puts you in a position to make a very good decision in that situation.
Understood. And then the last factor is emotional considerations, right? Emotional factors, right? So getting to a point where we can push ourselves into self-mastery, being objective, right? Which allows us to kind of take a step back and understand perhaps where some of our challenges are, and being able to recognize that there's a different way or the harder way that's not already preconditioned in what we do, perhaps entertaining that through baby steps.
Yeah, emotional factors, again, they can work for you or against you. They work against you because our brain wiring is really designed for physical survival. They work for you because we have information processing cells in our gut, it's called the enteric nervous system, and our heart that give us information that doesn't pass through the brain's filter. And that's why gut level feelings, gut level feelings are only really useful if you know yourself as you truly are. If you're fooling yourself about yourself and others, then your gut level feelings are going to lead you astray. And you might as well then, in that situation, rely on the brain in your head.
Incredible. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please check us out, www.ceoeffectiveness.com. When you get to the homepage, you will see the book that Dr. Anton mentioned called Business Success Through Self-Mastery. Right?
Self-knowledge. Yeah.
One of the self-knowledge. It is one of the most popular books that we have out there, and does touch on quite a few topics that can help you push your performance forward. Dr. Anton, always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have a great day.